Las Vegas Strip, July 4th, 2014. Security cameras captured what would later become the most analyzed 17 minutes of surveillance footage in Nevada criminal history. A young man in burgundy hotel uniform wheeled a brass luggage cart through marble corridors, stacked high with luxury suitcases, Louis Vuitton, Hermes, Gucci, the kind of baggage that screamed wealth and discretion. The bellboy moved with practiced efficiency through service corridors connecting the casino's public face to its hidden operational heart. Security guards nodded without interest. Cleaning staff stepped aside automatically. To everyone who saw him, he was invisible. Just another piece of the vast machinery keeping the casino running. What nobody realized was that those designer suitcases contained $19.5 million in cartel cash, freshly counted and ready to be laundered through high-roller gaming operations. And the young man pushing the cart had no intention of delivering them to their destination. Before we dive deeper into this unbelievable heist, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling us what city you're watching from. I always love seeing where our viewers are tuning in from. His name was Diego Alvarez, and in the next 24 hours, he would execute one of the most audacious thefts in American criminal history, stealing a fortune from some of the most dangerous people on earth and vanishing without a trace. Diego wasn't a criminal mastermind or professional thief, explains former FBI agent Maria Sanos. He was just a bellboy who happened to be in the right place at the right time, with the wrong kind of cargo and the perfect opportunity to disappear. The surveillance footage shows Diego approaching the service elevator at 11:47 p.m., his cart loaded, with what casino records indicated were personal belongings of VIP guest Ricardo Mendoza, a wealthy businessman from Guadalajara who had checked into the penthouse suite hours earlier. By morning, Diego would be gone, the money would be gone, and the most powerful drug cartel in Mexico would be asking, how did a 27-year-old hotel employee make them look like amateurs? Diego Alvarez was born September 15, 1987 in El Paso, Texas, in a small apartment overlooking the Rio Grande. His parents, Carmen and Miguel Alvarez, had crossed the border legally 3 years earlier, carrying nothing but hope and determination to build a better life. Miguel worked construction on casino boom projects, while Carmen cleaned houses in wealthy neighborhoods sprawling across the desert like concrete oases. They were the invisible workforce that made America run. Hardworking, honest people asking for nothing more than the chance to earn their way forward. Diego grew up understanding the rules of invisibility. In a world where documentation mattered more than character, where accent could determine opportunity, survival meant learning to blend in, to be helpful without being noticed, to exist in spaces between other people's attention. After graduating high school with a 3.7 GPA, but no money for college, Diego followed his father's path to Las Vegas. The city was booming in 2009, and the service industry offered steady work for someone willing to start at the bottom. The Mirage Casino hired Diego as a bellboy in March 2009 at $8.50 per hour plus tips. His supervisor, Robert Kim, later told investigators that Diego was an ideal employee from day one. Punctual, polite, and possessed of an almost supernatural ability to anticipate guest needs before they voice them. The best bellboys become invisible, Kim explains. Guests want their bags moved and problems solved, but they don't want to think about the person doing it. Diego understood this instinctively. For 5 years, Diego perfected the art of being helpful while remaining unnoticed. He learned which guests tipped well and which barely acknowledged his existence. He discovered service corridors connecting every part of the casino. He memorized security guard schedules, camera blind spots, and the rhythms of the vast machine generating millions daily. But despite his dedication, Diego remained trapped in economic quicksand, claiming so many service workers in Las Vegas. His hourly wage barely covered rent on a studio apartment in a rough neighborhood. Tips were unpredictable. A night serving high rollers might yield $200, while a slow Tuesday could net less than $30. By 2014, Diego's financial situation had become desperate. His mother, Carmen, needed diabetes medication costing $400 monthly. His gambling losses at employee poker games had accumulated to nearly $15,000. Most dangerously, he had borrowed $8,000 from loan shark Esteban Reyes, who charged interest rates that would have impressed medieval usurers. The pressure reached breaking point in June 2014, when Reyes visited Diego at work and delivered a simple message. Find $12,000 by July's end, or start looking over your shoulder for the rest of what might be a very short life. That night, as Diego processed luggage for high-rolling guests from Mexico, he noticed something that would change his life forever. As a senior bellboy, Diego had access to the VIP wing, where discretion wasn't just expected, it was mandatory. Guests paid premium rates not just for luxury accommodations, but for assurance that their business would remain completely private. Diego had worked VIP shifts regularly for 3 years, transporting luggage for tech billionaires, oil executives, foreign diplomats, and entertainment moguls. He had learned to recognize patterns of serious money, custom-tailored suits, understated jewelry, the quietly authoritative manner that came with generational wealth. But in spring 2014, Diego began noticing guests who didn't fit the usual profile. These clients dressed expensively but recently, like men who had acquired wealth quickly and were still learning how to wear it. They traveled with entourages of younger men who maintained military-style alertness. Most tellingly, they arrived with expensive luggage but departed with much lighter bags. Diego had developed unconscious expertise in reading baggage weight, explains former casino security consultant David Chen. After 5 years of moving suitcases, he could estimate contents just by how a bag felt when lifted. The revelation came on a humid Tuesday night in June 2014. Diego was transferring luggage for guest Carlos Mendoza, a man who had checked in with 6 heavy suitcases and was departing with the same 6 suitcases, weighing significantly less. As Diego loaded bags into his cart, one suitcase shifted and its zipper partially opened. Through the gap, he glimpsed something that made his heart skip. Neat stacks of $100 bills, bundled with currency straps and packed with bank vault precision. Diego's mind raced through implications. Wealthy guests often traveled with large amounts of cash, but the quantity he glimpsed suggested something beyond personal spending money. More importantly, why had the guest arrived with heavy bags and departed with light ones? Over the following month, Diego began documenting patterns he observed. He kept a small notebook hidden in his locker, recording details about guests displaying telltale signs. Expensive but recently acquired clothing, nervous entourages, and dramatic changes in luggage weight between arrival and departure. The pattern became unmistakable. These guests were arriving with suitcases full of cash and departing with suitcases full of casino chips or wire transfer receipts. They were using the Mirage Casino as a sophisticated money laundering operation, washing illegal profits through high-stakes gambling and legitimate financial instruments. The genius of the operation was its simplicity, explains former DEA agent Sarah Kim. Drug cartels generate enormous amounts of cash that's difficult to move and impossible to deposit in legitimate banks. Convert cash into casino chips, then convert chips into wire transfers to seemingly legitimate businesses worldwide. Diego realized he was witnessing one of the largest money laundering operations in American history, hidden in plain sight within the casino's VIP services. More importantly, he was one of the few people positioned to intercept it. By stealing cartel money being laundered through the casino, Diego would be robbing people who had no legal recourse and no ability to pursue him through official channels. The cartels would be forced to handle the theft privately, which meant Diego only needed to disappear long enough to get beyond their reach. As July 4th weekend approached, Diego finalized details of what would become the most audacious theft in cartel history. While Diego perfected his understanding of the cartel's money laundering operation, he simultaneously began planning his disappearance with methodical precision that would have impressed federal law enforcement. The challenge was enormous. How does someone with no criminal experience, limited resources, and well-documented identity vanish completely while carrying nearly $20 million in stolen cash? Diego's solution demonstrated intuitive understanding of investigative procedures. He realized a successful disappearance required 3 elements: a clean getaway, an untraceable vehicle, and a new identity that could withstand casual scrutiny. In April 2014, Diego used his real name to purchase a reliable but unremarkable 2007 Ford F-150 pickup truck from a Henderson used car lot. He paid cash, $8,700 representing his entire life savings, plus money borrowed against his next 3 paychecks. But Diego never registered the truck in Nevada. Instead, he drove it to Los Angeles and sold it to a dealer specializing in vehicles bound for Mexico. The dealer, asking no questions about paperwork, paid Diego $7,200 and promised the truck would be across the border within a week. 3 days later, Diego returned to Los Angeles and repurchased the same truck using fake California ID and the name Miguel Santos, an identity he had constructed using the birth certificate of a childhood friend who had died in a car accident years earlier. It was brilliant in its simplicity, admits former FBI agent Robert Park. If anyone traced the truck, they'd find it had been legitimately purchased by Diego Alvarez and then sold. The paper trail would stop there because officially Miguel Santos didn't exist. Diego's new identity was equally sophisticated. Using Miguel Santos's birth certificate, he had obtained a California driver's license, opened a bank account, and established modest credit history. To anyone conducting cursory background checks, Miguel Santos appeared to be a real person living quietly in Los Angeles. The physical transformation was subtle but effective. Diego grew a beard, gained 15 pounds by changing diet and exercise routines, and began wearing glasses with plain lenses. Changes were small enough that people who knew him well would still recognize him, but significant enough that casual observers might not. The escape route was elegantly simple. Diego identified a storage unit facility in Barstow, California, a desert town roughly equidistant between Las Vegas and Los Angeles. He rented the unit under his Miguel Santos identity and stocked it with supplies, extra clothing, non-perishable food, camping equipment, and 5 10-gallon containers of gasoline. 3 weeks before the heist, Diego began telling coworkers and friends he was planning a camping trip to celebrate his birthday and July 4th holiday. He showed them maps of remote Arizona and New Mexico areas, discussed his interest in desert photography, and even borrowed camping equipment from his neighbor. Diego created a plausible reason for his disappearance that would buy him crucial time, explains criminal psychologist Dr. Martinez. When he failed to return from his camping trip, people would assume he had gotten lost or injured in the desert. As July 4th weekend approached, Diego put final touches on his preparations. He withdrew his entire bank balance, $347, and closed his account. He packed a single backpack with essential items and stored it in his truck. He wrote letters to his mother and closest friend to be mailed after his disappearance. Most importantly, Diego finalized intelligence on the cartel's operations. His notebook contained detailed information about the specific guest arriving July 4th weekend with the largest cash shipment he had ever observed. Ricardo Mendoza expected to arrive with 6 suitcases containing what Diego estimated to be nearly $20 million. The stage was set for the crime of the century. July 4th, 2014, dawned clear and scorching across the Mojave Desert. By noon, Las Vegas had reached 108 degrees, and evening promised to be even hotter. The city braced for one of its busiest weekends as hundreds of thousands of tourists descended on the Strip to celebrate with gambling, shows, and spectacular fireworks. Diego arrived for his shift at 4 p.m., 3 hours early. He had volunteered for overtime, a gesture his supervisors appreciated during holiday chaos. But Diego's real motivation was timing. He needed to be in position when Ricardo Mendoza arrived with his suspicious cargo. At 7:30 p.m., as fireworks began launching from casino rooftops, a black Cadillac Escalade pulled up to the Mirage's VIP entrance. 3 men in expensive suits emerged, followed by a fourth who immediately commanded attention. Ricardo Mendoza was approximately 50, silver-haired, and carried himself with quiet authority that came from wielding serious power. He wore a custom-tailored charcoal suit costing more than Diego earned in 6 months, and his hands displayed manicured perfection, suggesting he had never performed manual labor. But it was Mendoza's entourage that confirmed Diego's suspicions. The 3 younger men moved with military precision, constantly scanning surroundings and maintaining positions, giving them clear sight lines and quick access to exits. These weren't business associates. They were security professionals protecting someone living under constant threat. At 8:45 p.m., the luggage arrived. 6 identical Hermes suitcases were unloaded from the Escalade by hotel security rather than regular staff, an unusual procedure indicating exceptional value of contents. Diego observed from distance as cases were inventoried, photographed, and tagged with special VIP handling codes. Diego's mathematical calculations were remarkably accurate. Each suitcase contained approximately $3.2 million in used $100 bills, packed with precision and sealed with tamper-evident tape. The total cargo represented $19.2 million in cartel profits ready to be laundered. At 9:15 p.m., Diego received the assignment he had been waiting for. Robert Kim approached him with the VIP luggage cart and specialized key card needed to access the penthouse level. Diego, I need you to handle the Mendoza luggage personally, Kim instructed. This is a Category 1 VIP client, which means absolute discretion and white glove service. Diego nodded professionally, but his heart was pounding. After months of planning, the moment had arrived. In approximately 90 minutes, Ricardo Mendoza and his associates would be settled in their suite, focused on evening entertainment. Service corridors would be relatively empty as staff concentrated on managing holiday crowds. At 11:30 p.m., as fireworks exploded overhead and the Strip celebrated America's birthday, Diego Alvarez began loading 6 Hermes suitcases containing $19.2 million onto his brass luggage cart. He had 17 minutes to change his life forever. At 11:32 p.m., Diego swiped his VIP access card and pushed the luggage cart into the service elevator. The casino's security system recorded his entry, noting authorized access and flagging nothing unusual about a bellboy transporting VIP luggage during evening shift. As elevator doors closed, Diego took a deep breath and pushed the button for sub-level 2 instead of the penthouse floor. Sub-level 2 housed mechanical systems, employee parking garage, and service loading docks. During holiday weekend, the area was virtually deserted as all available staff concentrated on managing crowds above ground. Diego had spent weeks studying security patrol timing in this area. Guards checked sub-levels approximately every 45 minutes during busy periods, and the last patrol had passed through at 11:10 p.m. This gave him a window of approximately 25 minutes. The luggage cart moved smoothly across polished concrete as Diego navigated toward loading dock C, where he had positioned his Ford F-150 pickup truck earlier that evening. The truck bore magnetic signs identifying it as belonging to Desert Catering Services, a fictitious company Diego had created using business cards and signage purchased online. At 11:37 p.m., Diego began transferring 6 Hermes suitcases from luggage cart to pickup truck. Each case weighed approximately 80 pounds, requiring him to work quickly despite physical strain. He covered suitcases with catering supplies, tablecloths, serving trays, and industrial-sized containers that made the truck's cargo appear consistent with its supposed business purpose. The most dangerous moment came at 11:41 p.m. when security guard James Mitchell conducted an unscheduled patrol of the loading dock area. Mitchell later told investigators he observed a catering truck being loaded by someone in hotel uniform, but thought nothing of it. Weekend events often required additional food service deliveries. When he spotted the security guard, Diego continued working normally while calling out a casual greeting. "Evening, Officer Mitchell. Hell of a busy night up there." Mitchell waved and continued his patrol, noting nothing suspicious about an employee he recognized working overtime during a holiday weekend. At 11:44 p.m., Diego closed the truck's tailgate and returned the empty luggage cart to the service elevator. He rode back to the main level, positioned the cart in VIP storage area, and clocked out using the employee time system. Diego walked calmly to employee parking lot, removed magnetic catering signs from his truck, and started the engine. At 11:49 p.m., he drove slowly through the casino's security checkpoint, where guards glanced at his employee ID and waved him through without inspection. The beautiful simplicity of Diego's plan was that he never actually broke any casino rules or violated security protocols, observes behavioral analyst Dr. Rodriguez. He used authorized access to transport VIP luggage using approved procedures. The only deviation was his destination. As Diego drove east on Flamingo Road, fireworks continued exploding overhead, celebrating the birth of a nation built on the idea that anyone could reinvent themselves. Behind him, the Mirage Casino glittered with lights and possibilities, completely unaware that one of its most trusted employees had just walked away with the largest theft in cartel history. In the back of his pickup truck, 6 Hermes suitcases contained enough money to buy mansions, yachts, or small businesses. But Diego Alvarez had more modest goals. He wanted to disappear completely and start over somewhere the cartels could never find him. Diego drove east through the neon wilderness of Las Vegas Boulevard, past Luxor's Pyramid, Excalibur's medieval towers, and New York's replicated skyline. At this hour on July 4th, the Strip was packed with celebrating tourists, but Diego felt completely isolated in his truck cab, separated from revelry by the weight of his cargo and magnitude of what he had just accomplished. His destination was the storage unit in Barstow, California, a 160-mile journey through some of the most desolate terrain in North America. Diego had chosen this route specifically because it avoided major cities, border checkpoints, and interstate highways, where state police concentrated their patrols. At 12:30 a.m., Diego stopped at a 24-hour gas station in Jean, Nevada, a tiny gambling town on the California border. Security cameras recorded him purchasing energy drinks, beef jerky, and a detailed road atlas, the last purchases he would make under his real name. The desert highway stretched endlessly ahead, illuminated only by Diego's headlights and occasional passing truck. The truck's air conditioning struggled against ambient heat, which remained above 95 degrees even after midnight. At 2:15 a.m., Diego reached his storage unit facility in Barstow. The facility was unmanned after midnight, accessible only through keypad codes customers could use 24 hours daily. Diego parked his truck in front of Unit 47, entered his access code, and raised the metal door to reveal carefully prepared supplies. The storage unit contained everything Diego needed for extended disappearance: extra clothing, non-perishable food, camping equipment, and most importantly, 5 10-gallon containers of gasoline, allowing him to drive over 1,000 miles without stopping at service stations. Diego worked quickly to transfer 6 suitcases from his truck to the storage unit, where he opened each case to verify contents. The sight of nearly $20 million in cash, neatly bundled and secured with currency straps, was overwhelming, even though he had expected it. Working by flashlight to avoid attracting attention, Diego began transformation from Diego Alvarez to Miguel Santos. He changed into different clothing, applied temporary hair dye to darken his appearance, and retrieved fake identification documents he had prepared months earlier. Most importantly, Diego abandoned his cell phone, wallet, and all identification connecting him to his real identity. These items went into a weighted bag that he would dispose of in the Colorado River during his journey east. At 3:45 a.m., Miguel Santos began driving east toward Arizona in a truck loaded with enough gasoline to reach Mexico without stopping. Behind him, 6 empty suitcases and a set of casino uniforms provided the only physical evidence that Diego Alvarez had ever existed. The desert sunrise found Miguel Santos crossing into Arizona, heading toward a new life built on the foundation of the most successful theft in cartel history. Saturday morning, July 5th, arrived with oppressive heat that made Las Vegas summers legendary. By 8 a.m., temperature was already climbing toward what would become a record-breaking 114 degrees, and the Mirage Casino was transitioning from holiday night chaos to organized holiday morning cleanup. VIP Services Manager Lisa Chen arrived at her office at 7:30 a.m. to begin processing checkout procedures for weekend's high-roller guests. The Independence Day weekend had been exceptionally profitable, with total gaming revenue exceeding $4.2 million. At 8:15 a.m., Chen called the penthouse suite occupied by Ricardo Mendoza to confirm his departure schedule and arrange luggage pickup. The phone was answered by one of Mendoza's associates, who requested immediate assistance with checkout procedures. Chen contacted VIP Storage Area to arrange retrieval of 6 Hermes suitcases that had been delivered to Mendoza's suite the previous evening. According to standard procedures, luggage should have been returned to secure storage after the guests' evening activities. At 8:22 a.m., VIP Storage Supervisor Michael Torres contacted Chen with disturbing news. The 6 suitcases tagged for Ricardo Mendoza were not in the secure storage area. A comprehensive search of all VIP storage locations had found no trace of the missing luggage. Chen immediately escalated the situation to Casino Security Director Robert Park, who authorized an emergency review of surveillance footage from the previous evening. The investigation focused on tracking movement of the 6 distinctive suitcases from their arrival at 8:45 p.m. to their expected location in VIP storage. At 8:45 a.m., security analyst Jennifer Liu began reviewing digital surveillance records. The casino system archived footage from 1,247 cameras, generating approximately 30,000 hours of video daily. At 9:10 a.m., Liu made the discovery that would launch one of the largest theft investigations in Nevada history. Surveillance footage showed Diego Alvarez loading 6 suitcases onto his cart at 11:32 p.m., but there was no record of him delivering them to the penthouse suite or returning them to VIP storage. More alarmingly, footage showed Diego taking the service elevator to sub-level 2 instead of the penthouse floor, remaining there for exactly 17 minutes, and then returning with an empty cart. At 9:25 a.m., Park authorized a full security lockdown of the casino. No employee could leave the building until questioned, and all departing guests were subject to enhanced screening procedures. The Nevada Gaming Control Board was notified, and FBI agents were en route. But the most immediate problem was Ricardo Mendoza, who was waiting in the VIP departure lounge for luggage that no longer existed. At 9:30 a.m., Lisa Chen approached Ricardo Mendoza with news that his luggage was temporarily unavailable due to a security verification procedure. She offered complimentary accommodation for an extended stay. Mendoza's reaction was controlled but unmistakably dangerous. His associates immediately began making phone calls in rapid Spanish, and within minutes, additional security personnel arrived. These weren't hotel employees. They were private contractors whose presence suggested the stakes extended far beyond ordinary theft. At 10:15 a.m., FBI Special Agent Maria Santos arrived to begin what would become one of the most complex theft investigations in Bureau history. Her first briefing revealed the scope. Nearly $20 million in suspected cartel money had been stolen by a trusted employee who had vanished without a trace. The investigation's first priority was locating Diego Alvarez, who had failed to report for his scheduled shift and wasn't answering his phone. Agents were dispatched to his Henderson apartment, while additional teams began analyzing surveillance footage. At 11:30 a.m., the FBI team at Diego's apartment made a discovery confirming their worst fears. The apartment was completely empty, with no personal belongings, furniture, or evidence that anyone had lived there recently. The only evidence Diego had left behind was a handwritten note taped to the bathroom mirror. "I'm sorry for any trouble this causes. Please tell my mother I love her and that I'm safe." As the FBI investigation expanded, Ricardo Mendoza and his associates quietly departed the casino, taking with them any hope that the missing money might be recovered through cooperation with its owners. The cartels would handle this matter privately, using resources and methods that made federal law enforcement look restrained by comparison. By noon on July 5, 2014, two separate manhunts were underway. The FBI was searching for Diego Alvarez to charge him with theft, while cartel operatives were searching for Miguel Santos to execute him for stealing their money. Neither group realized they were looking for the same person. Miguel Santos crossed the Texas border at 3:30 a.m. on July 7, 2014, driving a dust-covered Ford pickup with California plates and camping equipment that perfectly matched his cover story. To Border Patrol agents conducting routine inspections, he was simply another American tourist returning from a 4th of July weekend in the Southwest. Santos answered border agents' questions calmly, explaining he had been camping in Big Bend National Park and was returning to Los Angeles. His truck contained exactly the equipment someone would expect from a solo camping trip, and his Spanish was fluent enough to suggest legitimate Mexican heritage. More importantly, Santos displayed none of the nervous behaviors that typically attracted additional attention from border security. He made appropriate eye contact, answered questions directly, and showed the slight impatience of someone eager to get home after a long trip. While Miguel Santos drove toward his new life, the FBI investigation into Diego Alvarez's disappearance was expanding exponentially. Federal agents had identified the scope of the theft through analysis of surveillance footage and financial records, and the case had been elevated to the Bureau's highest priority level. The FBI's analysis of Diego's escape revealed the sophistication of his planning. Investigators discovered he had purchased a pickup truck months earlier, established a false identity using legitimate documents, and prepared supplies allowing him to survive independently for extended periods. Meanwhile, cartel operatives were conducting their own investigation with resources and methods federal law enforcement couldn't match. Ricardo Mendoza's organization had mobilized a network of informants, private investigators, and corrupt officials extending throughout North America. The cartel investigation had identified Diego's transformation into Miguel Santos within a week of the theft, but tracking Miguel's movements proved equally challenging. The false identity was sophisticated enough to resist casual investigation, and Miguel had deliberately chosen a travel route avoiding major cities and electronic surveillance networks. By August 2014, both the FBI and cartel investigations had essentially stalled. Despite deploying significant resources and sophisticated techniques, neither group had developed reliable leads about Diego's location or intentions. Miguel Santos crossed into Mexico at Laredo on July 8, 2014, carrying legitimate identification and a believable cover story that had been months in the making. To Mexican customs officials, he was simply another Mexican-American returning to visit family in the interior states. Santos had chosen Guanajuato State specifically because of its combination of tourist infrastructure and economic opportunity. The region's colonial cities attracted American expatriates seeking affordable retirement destinations, while its agricultural economy provided legitimate business opportunities for someone with capital to invest. Santos's first stop was San Miguel de Allende, a UNESCO World Heritage Site that had become popular with American retirees and artists. The city's large expatriate community provided perfect camouflage for someone seeking to blend in while establishing a new identity. Santos rented a modest apartment in the city's historic center and began carefully establishing his new identity within the local community. He enrolled in advanced Spanish classes, joined a photography club, and volunteered with local charities, activities providing social connections while supporting his cover story. Miguel presented himself as a recently divorced graphic designer from Los Angeles who had decided to pursue his passion for photography and learn about his Mexican heritage, recalls Spanish instructor Maria Valdez. Over the following months, Santos gradually integrated himself into the expatriate community by being helpful without being memorable. He was always willing to help with translation, knew the best local restaurants, and never caused any problems. But if asked to describe his personality in detail, people would struggle to think of anything distinctive. Santos's approach to building his new identity demonstrated sophisticated understanding of social psychology. Rather than trying to remain completely isolated, he gradually became part of the community in ways that provided both social connections and protective camouflage. Miguel was the perfect neighbor, explains fellow expatriate Jennifer Park. But now that I think about it, I realize I never knew very much about his actual background or personal life. As 2014 drew to a close, Miguel Santos had successfully established a new identity and integrated himself into Mexican society. But the most dangerous phase of his plan was about to begin, returning to the United States to retrieve his fortune and begin converting it into legitimate assets. In January 2015, Miguel Santos returned to the United States carrying Mexican documentation and a carefully crafted business plan. His goal was converting stolen cash into legitimate assets through a series of small businesses that could justify large cash transactions while building documented income history. Santos retrieved the money from his Barstow storage unit and transported it to an abandoned ranch property in rural New Mexico where he could work without surveillance. He had identified cattle ranching as an industry where cash transactions remain common, making it ideal for money laundering. Miguel chose cattle ranching specifically because it's one of the few remaining businesses where major cash transactions don't automatically trigger reporting requirements, explains agricultural economist Dr. Patricia Chen. Over 18 months, Santos systematically converted stolen money into legitimate business assets. He purchased cattle, installed irrigation systems, built storage facilities, and bought farm equipment, all transactions that were perfectly legal and completely documented. Santos's approach was methodical and patient. He never processed more than $50,000 per month, keeping him below most federal reporting thresholds. Each transaction was properly documented and consistent with his stated business purposes. The ranch operation also provided cover for Santos's true activities. He hired local workers who knew him only as a successful Mexican businessman investing in American agriculture. His fluent Spanish and knowledge of ranching techniques supported his cover story, while his business success earned respect in the local community. By mid-2016, Santos had successfully converted approximately $3.2 million of stolen money into legitimate ranch assets. His operation was generating genuine profit, providing documented income that supported his cover identity and allowed him to maintain a comfortable lifestyle without attracting attention. But Santos's greatest achievement was psychological rather than financial. He had successfully transformed himself from Diego Alvarez, the desperate casino employee, into Miguel Santos, the successful rancher. The transformation was so complete that he began to believe his own cover story. This psychological transformation created both security and vulnerability. Santos's genuine commitment to his new identity made him virtually undetectable to investigators looking for someone living a criminal lifestyle. But it also made him reluctant to abandon the life he had built. even when continuing to live as Miguel Santos created increasing risks. 3 years after Diego Alvarez's disappearance, FBI cybercrime specialist Amanda Liu was conducting routine review of cold cases when she noticed an anomaly overlooked during the initial investigation. Hidden in the metadata of the casino's surveillance system was evidence that someone had accessed camera controls during the night of the theft. Modern surveillance systems log every interaction, including routine maintenance and operator commands, Liu explains. When I analyzed the complete digital record, I found evidence that someone had deliberately created blind spots in camera coverage during the critical time period. The discovery suggested Diego's theft had been even more sophisticated than originally believed. Rather than simply exploiting existing security vulnerabilities, he had actively manipulated the surveillance system to create opportunities for his escape. Liu's analysis revealed that surveillance system modifications had been implemented gradually over several months, suggesting Diego had been planning his theft since at least early 2014. The digital evidence provided new insights into his technical capabilities and planning methodology. The FBI reopened the Diego Alvarez investigation with renewed resources and updated methodology. The new evidence suggested Diego possessed technical skills that could be traced through digital forensics, potentially providing leads that traditional investigation had missed. The investigation team began analyzing Diego's digital footprint from months before his disappearance, looking for evidence of research and preparation necessary for his sophisticated theft. They found evidence that Diego had researched money laundering techniques, studied law enforcement procedures, and investigated countries without extradition treaties. The renewed FBI investigation began focusing on Americans who had established businesses in Mexico using cash investments during the time period following Diego's disappearance. The criteria were specific enough to generate a manageable list of suspects while broad enough to capture someone using sophisticated false identity techniques. The list included approximately 40 individuals, including someone named Miguel Santos, who had purchased ranch property in New Mexico using suspicious cash transactions that matched the time frame of Diego's disappearance. The convergence of new technology, renewed investigation, and Miguel's own business success was creating the perfect storm that would finally expose one of the most successful disappearances in criminal history. On March 15, 2018, FBI agents arrived at Miguel Santos's ranch in New Mexico, carrying a federal warrant and evidence that would finally close the case of Diego Alvarez's disappearance. The arrest came not through sophisticated detective work, but through patient application of digital forensics to a crime that had occurred in a different technological era. When we knocked on Miguel's door, he didn't run or resist or even seem surprised, recalls FBI Special Agent Maria Santos. He just asked if he could finish feeding his cattle before we took him into custody. The ranch that Miguel had built with stolen money had become a legitimate business enterprise employing 12 local workers and generating annual revenues, exceeding $400,000. His cattle operation was considered a model of sustainable agriculture, and his reputation in the local community was impeccable. The evidence against Miguel was overwhelming. Digital forensics had connected him to casino surveillance system modifications, financial analysis had traced his money laundering activities, and investigators had discovered the original Hermes suitcases in his abandoned storage unit. During questioning, Miguel Santos confessed completely to the theft and his subsequent activities. But investigators were surprised by his motivation and his use of the stolen money. Miguel hadn't lived a lavish lifestyle or squandered the money on personal luxuries, Agent Santos explains. He had built a legitimate business that employed local workers and contributed to the community. The confession revealed the psychological journey that had transformed Diego Alvarez into Miguel Santos. The theft hadn't been motivated by greed, but by desperation, and the subsequent years had been spent trying to build something positive from a criminal foundation. Miguel told us that he knew he would eventually be caught, but he wanted to use the time he had to create something worthwhile, recalls investigating agent Jennifer Park. He had convinced himself that stealing cartel money and using it for legitimate purposes was somehow justifiable. Miguel Santos was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for theft, money laundering, and identity fraud. The sentence was significantly less than the maximum possible penalty, reflecting both his cooperation with investigators and the unique circumstances of his case. Miguel's sentencing hearing was unlike anything I had experienced in 20 years of criminal law, explains defense attorney Robert Kim. We had character witnesses from his ranch community, employees whose livelihoods he had created, and even law enforcement officers who admitted they were conflicted about prosecuting someone who had used stolen money so constructively. The ranch. Property was seized as proceeds of criminal activity, but rather than being sold at auction, it was transferred to a nonprofit organization that continues Miguel's sustainable agriculture program while employing the same local workers he had hired.